Hello everyone and welcome to the Chrissy B Show. Now, renting a property should be relatively straightforward and longer leases are becoming more common, but unfortunately can come with certain risks, and sometimes renting can end up being very, very stressful. Today we're going to be discussing how to cope with a nightmare landlord. Landlords from hell can make our daily lives seem like a struggle, from not protecting a deposit to being virtually uncontactable or doing extensive and noisy repairs without giving you any notice. We'll be hearing a real-life story from Yasmin Akermark about her experience, and also be speaking to Dirghayu Patel, a housing solicitor from GT Stewart, who'll be giving us some expert advice on renting and preventing spats with landlords. And later, I'll be joined by Coach Chris Browne to discuss how to keep stress at bay when dealing with difficult landlords. So first, let's go to Yasmin and hear her story. Hello, Yasmin.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well. Now, you're smiling today because you're not going through those issues that you were with the agency that you were with at the time.
No.
But you went through quite a bit of a hellish time, really, I would say.
Definitely.
Yes. Was this your first property you were renting?
No, it wasn't, but it was one of my first ones. It was in 2010, so I was quite young at the time.
Yeah.
And I was renting with two other girls who were even younger, and I think we were definitely being taken advantage of by the fact that we were quite young.
Right. Were you quite excited to move in before all the trouble started?
Yeah, definitely. It was, it was a good deal in terms of the location. It was really central. It was a really, it was a big flat. It wasn't that expensive, and in the end, it probably wasn't. Well, it was definitely not worth it for all the, problems we had to deal with.
So when did you realise something was wrong?
Well, I mean, immediately when we moved in, we realised that.
From the first day?
Yeah, basically from the first day, we moved in, and all the wardrobes were covered with, the landlady left all her personal belongings. So all her stuff,
everything there,
all the clothing, everything basically was left in the flat. And we were, because
So what did you do with your stuff?
Well, we were kind of, that's really bizarre, because we signed up for like a 2-year, but we could break it after a year.
Yeah.
So we're like, are we supposed to live here for 2 years with all her personal belongings, having our stuff in suitcases on the side, or, so that was the first issue we had.
Yeah.
And then so we were 3 girls renting a 2-bedroom, but the agency was very aware of that we were 3 girls. So we needed to get a bed, which took some time for them, but they were sorting it out for us with the approval of the landlady.
So did you have to share a bed?
Well, I was sleeping on the sofa because I had the living room kind of. So I mean, that was all right. That wasn't the main issue kind of thing. And then eventually they came and took all her belongings.
How long did it take though for them to come and get her stuff?
It probably took 3-4 weeks to be honest. Yeah, exactly. And you're paying still quite a lot of money, even though it was
Yeah.
So that was the first kind of issue, and then it kind of just went down.
Really? What worse than that?
Yes,
what
definitely.
Happened?
Well, so from that point where they had picked up all the stuff, they kept kind of coming into the flat with us without us knowing it.
Who's they? The agency?
The agency, the handyman, the landlady's cousin.
Why? What for?
Well, they were like, we were picking up the stuff, we had to leave these things, you said that the bed, it had different reasons. It was really bizarre coming home and someone was in the flat.
So they wouldn't contact you before, they would just see these random people?
There was and someone had been there, even if you weren't home, you would have known that someone was there. And then I think, so we started renting in July, and in November, one day I got home and all her stuff was just put back, and it wasn't put back in, it was just in bags, in big bags in the hallway.
So hang on, so the stuff had been removed from the wardrobe,
from the flat,
and now a few months later,
they were
back in the flat in black bin bags.
Yes, black and blue bin bags, and just the whole hallway covered with her stuff. And we're like, what is this? Without it was really. Yeah, that wasn't good, and that's when the real.
So mad.
I know, but it was just like, what are we going to do with this? It's just all this stuff, and we can't live like this, But then that was when the real problem started. So basically, apparently, she was not in the UK, and she had become really angry about so the agency was having her stuff in their basement, so they didn't want to keep her stuff, so they kind of contacted her and said, this doesn't work, and then she got. I'm not sure what happened, but basically she said that she never agreed that 3 girls were supposed to live in the flat. And that's
but it was on the paperwork that
it was so basically what on the papers when we signed with the agency, we were 2 students and 1 girl was working. So they said just sign the 2 students because just better. And we were like, okay, we didn't really, because that
didn't think it, but you kind of trusted the agency.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And they said, that's how it's always done. Kind of, we were thinking, okay, didn't think much about it. But then
our expert's listening to all of this, by the way, so he's clocking all this up too, because he's going to be addressing each of these points.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
Yeah, so basically they said, the landlady said you can't live there 3 people, you have to pay a third rent. But the third girl, she had signed papers, she had signed the deposit. So she was actually on papers, but the agency forgot about that because they started denying her existence. Oh, dear. They said they'd never met her, which we had text as well proving. So they were like, no, we don't know what you're talking about. And then they wanted a third rent of and then they said you have to move out.
Oh dear.
And
but how are you feeling sort of on a day-to-day basis having to deal with all this though? Because obviously you're talking about it now, but obviously you're not going through it at the moment. When you were going through it at the time, what was life like for you?
Well, it was because one girl, she was working a lot. The other girl, she didn't really like to deal with this kind of thing, so I had to deal with all of it, and it was really stressful because every day I was like, oh, should I look for somewhere else to live? Are we going to have to pay a lot more money? And I had to go to Citizen Advice Bureau and spend a lot of time with that, and it was just it just brings you down because every week there was something major happening. They were like, emailing or calling us, and it was just it's just really
so you couldn't
stressful.
You couldn't enjoy your
because
house,
it was such a good location. It was such a good flat, even though it was outdated. It was such a good location, but in the end I was so stressed about everything, and I was like started looking for other places to live, but then I was like, I don't want to have to pay a double rent. And I just felt
sometimes it's better to live in a box room and have no stress than live in a really nice place.
I think so. It would have been better to live in Zone 5 in a little box than like the Zone. Zone 2. But it was just I was really stressed, and I was really like now I haven't forgotten about it, but it was so and the girls I lived with, we started not arguing, but we were like we were stressing as well. What's going to happen? And it kind of brought the whole, everything was hard.
So how did you deal with like random people just being in the house? How did that make you feel? Because that must have been really...
Yeah, so there was the one time when it was really bad. So this was actually just a few months before we moved out. So I came out of the shower and this random man is standing there. And I was like, whoa, this is just you being really shocked. Like, who are you?
Course.
And like, why are you in the flat? And like, he's like, oh, I'm from the agency. And I'm like, what? And he's like, I'm showing the landlady's cousin the flat. And I was like, what? And I was just really so shocked. Like, because, I was like,
of course.
Yeah. And then he's like, oh yeah, I'll come back in a sec. And I was like, what? So he walked out, left. And I was just like, so I put the little like chain, on the door. And I was just like, no way. Because by that time, I had read the contract quite a few times. Okay. So I knew they had to give 24 hours notice in writing.
So it sounds like they were kind of hoping that none of you had read the contract before.
They were
to know,
just taking
maybe
advantage
didn't know your
of
rights.
us completely and just like not like,
So, and were they unapologetic when the guy just walked in?
Well, this is the thing. No, he was just like, I'm just going to show, just completely.
Like it was nothing.
Yeah, and then so once he got back, like maybe 10 minutes later, I didn't open the door, only with the chain kind of thing. And I was like, hello, and he's like, oh, hey. And I was like, you can't just walk in like that. And that's when I got really angry because he wasn't even like, I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to. And as he was just being so like, what do you mean? But I did call you. And I was like, then I got really angry. So I was just like, you cannot do that. You have to give me 24 hours notice in writing. And he's like, we can't come in? I was like, no.
Good for you.
Yeah, I know. So I was just like, no, you cannot come in. And he was like, okay, well, can we write a note to you now? And then I was like, well, no, it has to be recorded delivery.
So you kind of wised up, didn't you?
I made him post it. I was like, I can't assure you that I've read it if you just hand me a note through the door. You have to have a recorded delivery to prove it, because by that time there have been so many problems with them saying that there was no proof of her living there, there was no paperwork. So I was just going to do the same.
So you learnt to play their game in the end, didn't
you? He was so angry. He was like, I can't believe it. I can't believe you're doing this. I was like, I can't believe you're so rude.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're going to get some expert advice after the break. I know you've got a few more things to tell us about, but we're going to bring Dirghayu Patel here to give his opinion about what went on with Yasmin, and also if you guys are going through anything similar at home, he's going to give us some advice and to tell your legal rights as well. So do join us after this break.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Chrissy B Show, always aiming to show you the happier side of life. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter.
Welcome back to today's programme, where we are speaking about dealing with nightmare landlords and all the stress that comes with it. Now, before we speak to our expert, let's take a look at this video, and some of it might seem quite familiar.
Ooh. So, this is the hallway. Oh, careful. Get that out. Oh. What's that doing there? So, what do you think?
Yeah, it's good.
Well, what I want you to try and do is remember how lovely this is when you're looking at the rest of the flat, okay? Come on. As you can see, this place is completely, fully built. You've got your walls, ceiling, dado rail up there.
Is there central heating?
There's a radiator.
Does it work?
You can see your breath.
You can, can't you? Yes, kids will love that. You know, invite the friends round for a bit of a breathe. Pretend you're smoking real cigarettes. Better than Xbox. Oh, it's got everything. I mean, of course, there's a couple of minor plumbing issues, but nothing a few turns of a spanner can't sort out. Cup of tea? There we go. A bit temperamental, this. Last tenant claimed it was unsafe. Oh, we can't heat up the milk bottles. There's sparks coming from the plug sockets. There's something living in the bathroom. Man up. You know, some people, they don't know how good they've got it, do they?
Does the fridge work?
Ah, it's great, that fridge. It's loyal. Anyway, moving on. In you come. This is where the magic happens.
The letting agent said you'd furnished the flat.
I have.
Oh, is there an inventory or something?
No, there's no need for all that legal mumbo jumbo. We're all friends here, aren't we? I mean, I trust you. Yeah? Look at that. Bouncy. Right, let's talk about the Benjamins.
What?
600 plus 750 goodwill gesture up front, cash in hand. This place is priced to go. I've got people desperate to see it, so, you know, it's make your mind up time.
Who's that?
Who's what?
Hello, Nigel, is that you?
No!
Have you changed the locks?
I've told you before, Neil, you don't live here anymore. You've been evicted.
But you knew I had to come back and collect our bits. You can't
So,
just
what's
change
it
the
gonna be?
locks.
Are you ready? Do you want to move in?
Right, I'm calling the police.
What are you doing? Just let him in.
Look, what's going on? Who are you?
It's a bit like Big Brother, this, isn't it? Eviction night.
Where are the rest of my things?
Where's your inventory? Look, I'll need you to sign this. There's no need to read.
All right, so obviously that was a very exaggerated situation there, but some of the points were very valid, and there was a couple of points there that we'd like to point out. One was about the inventory, and the other thing where he was saying basically, oh, we're all friends here, you can trust, you can trust me. So we'll talk about this in just a moment. So now joining us, we have Dirghayu Patel from GT Stewart. Hello.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
It's really good to have you here because we really need some help here. Obviously, you've heard just some of Yasmin's story, but from what she said so far, what do you think about what happened to her?
Well, there's a number of things that's gone wrong in Yasmin's case, and before I sort of comment on that, I mean, seeing the video and then obviously hearing Yasmin's story kind of brings home the reality that there's a really close connection between our sort of shelter, the place we want to crash, and our well-being. And if there's issues with your shelter, you know, your home, then that does adversely impact on your well-being.
It's so important, isn't it?
So
you need to be comfortable.
It's crucial that people know about their rights and how to enforce their rights, because that's a key way to, you know, preserving their well-being. And hopefully after today's program, people will be more knowledgeable about their rights and how they can go about.
Because when you go home, because obviously if you're full day at work or you're studying, you're already quite stressed out. Then you go home and you've got all that stuff to deal with. You're not comfortable. You can't relax. People get depressed because of things like that. It's actually a really serious
Exactly,
issue.
and sadly, in my line of work, we see it every day. But let's sort of look at the positives and how we can sort of address this problem through the law. Coming to sort of commenting on Yasmin's case, I mean, the key document is the tenancy agreement or the contract, because that defines the relationship between the landlord and the tenant. And whatever rights the tenant has comes from the tenancy agreement. Now, so that raises the issue of what's in the tenancy agreement, what are the terms of the agreement, and that's influenced by the negotiations that take place before the agreement comes into being. So whatever conversation Yasmin and her friends had with the landlord or the landlord's agent, and what agreements that resulted as a result of those conversations. So, I mean, the first thing is that I'm pretty sure that Yasmin and her friends wanted a property that was free of anyone else's possessions.
Of course, yeah.
So that's the first thing that hasn't been met by the landlord.
So could she have walked out at that point?
Yes, exactly. I mean, this is something that some contract lawyers would argue that where you've got a discussion between a landlord and a prospective tenant, and the landlord or their agent says, I will give you a property which has certain characteristics in terms of size or in terms of, you know, it being unfurnished or furnished, and then you arrive at the property and it's not what it's being described, then you can say that you've been there's been a misrepresentation on the part of the landlord, and that's induced you to enter into the agreement. And at that stage, you're perfectly within your rights to walk away from the agreement. And the problem
get your deposit back.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I would actually hold off on the deposit until, you know, the agreement has started and you've been to the property and the property is as you expected.
It to be,
The problem in these kind of cases is that the contract law assumes that there's an equality of bargaining power between the landlord and the tenant, but that isn't the case. The landlord has sort of the advantage in the sense that, especially properties of a certain type and in a certain location, the demand is going to outstrip the supply,
Yeah.
and people are sort of keen to get a place. So that sort of plays into the landlord's hands.
So they can sort of take advantage and
Yes.
expect the tenants not to really kick up a fuss about small things, seemingly small things. That's so bad.
And the laws try to sort of correct these this sort of imbalance over the years. I mean, laws have been passed to give tenants the benefit of certain minimum standards. And one of those minimum standards is the right to quiet enjoyment. So once you enter into a tenancy, you move into the property, it's a basic right that you're allowed to enjoy the property unencumbered. So that means that the landlord cannot enter the property whenever they want, or the landlord's agent. So that's another thing that's happened which shouldn't have happened in Yasmin's case. And arguably, Yasmin could sort of take action to prevent that, because it's
Could she
not.
change the locks? Is she allowed to do that?
No, she
Oh, no,
can't.
okay.
Well, she can.
I bet you thought about it though, didn't you?
The first thing to do is to remind the landlord and or his agent of their sort of duty to allow quiet enjoyment.
Yeah.
And
actually show that you've read the contract
yes,
and you know your
and
rights.
that they're not allowed to enter the property as they please.
Okay.
They have
Okay,
to
can you just hold it there, because we need to go to a quick break, but you've got plenty more to share with us, haven't you?
Yeah, there's lots to say.
All right, the time does fly on this show, so I know you guys at home that are going through this, you're really interested in this, so do stay tuned for more.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Chrissy B Show, always aiming to show you the happier side of life. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter.
Welcome back, and if you've just joined us, we are talking about how to deal with nightmare landlords, but let's see what you guys on the streets of London had to say about it.
Have you ever had a bad landlord?
Definitely.
What's happened?
Oh, without doubt, overcharge me. After overcharging me, want to basically evict me.
Did you contest it?
I am contesting it right now. I'm in that process right now.
Wow.
But I'm gonna go move out anyway.
How are you coping with the stress of it?
I'm not. It's stressing me out. It is really stressing me out. I have to come to work and still sort out my day and have somewhere to live. So it's a little stress.
Well, I was at university. I had one that was less than great.
What happened?
Just, I think there were a couple of incidents like the bathroom leaking and, shower issues and stuff like that that were not fixed particularly promptly.
I haven't had a bad landlord, but I've had bad tenants.
What's happened?
So they're not supposed to smoke, and they've smoked, and then they've dropped cigarettes on the floor, so my carpet had burn marks in it. I had tenants that don't pay rent, and I'm the type, as long as you tell me what's going on, I can work with you, but they just refuse to pay rent, and because of the court system, the court's on their side. So I have to give them 30 days notice. I have to keep telling them that they're not paying rent and they're late. And with that, they can stay in the house up until the time is for them to get kicked out, which is when their lease is up.
Do you think that landlords are taking advantage of the renting of tenants these days?
I think that given the housing market and the fact that it's very hard to buy, the landlords are in a really prominent position. So I do think that some do take advantage more than they potentially should, yeah.
Yes, some certainly do take advantage. Just to read a couple of comments here as well. This person says, my student house in Coventry got burgled in April 2007 and the landlady didn't fix the broken back door until May 2008. And another person says, I've been so tortured by this major construction project that I've started having panic attacks. My home should be safe and it's not. I've learned this month that the landlord can come in every single day if he wants to. So, there's a lot going on, and it does affect a person's well-being and mental health if things aren't sorted out. But we have our expert here, Dirghayu Patel, who's given some advice for tenants, and we've also heard Yasmin's story, her nightmare story as well about what happened. So what else can you tell us about maybe things that tenants could look out for to safeguard themselves?
I mean, reacting to those comments from the members, the people off the street, another sort of key minimum standard is that the landlord has the duty to keep the property in repair, and tenants have the corresponding right to have it kept in repair. It's not an open-ended obligation on the part of the landlord. It is limited to the structure and the exterior of the property and the installations for water, gas, electricity and heating. So basically the shell of what sort of makes a home. So as long as the landlord's been notified of any sort of a defect to the structure, any defect that falls within his obligation, then he has to remedy it within a reasonable time.
What's a reasonable time, would you say?
Well, that depends upon what the defect is. So if it's something like,
I suppose
the heating system is out of order and there's no heating, then that has to be fixed pretty urgently. Similarly, something that could affect the structural integrity of the property. If there's a leaky roof and that's letting in lots of water and that's causing dampness, and that can be very sort of damaging to health and safety. So those kind of things the landlord has to fix. It is the landlord's duty, and the landlord cannot contract out of it. I've seen lots of cases where the landlord issues a tenancy agreement which says that they don't have a repair obligation, or any repair obligation is conditional on the tenant paying the rent. Those kind of terms are invalid.
Really?
And yes.
Wow, that's good to know.
And one further point, if the landlord doesn't comply with his repair obligation, the tenant has remedies in the county court where they can enforce their rights by, the court can order the landlord to do the works. And the tenant can get damages for the loss that they've suffered. At GT Stewart, we have handled many of these cases and won thousands of pounds of damages for clients.
So it's good to know this, because people that are unaware of their rights, they will just carry on living like that. And
yes, and despite the best efforts of our coalition government, there is still a legal aid sector where lawyers specialising in this area can provide assistance to clients. And picking up from that video we saw earlier, the extreme case, in that property there were several items of disrepair which the landlord has to fix. There was broken electrics, there was a heating system which wasn't working, there was prevalent damp at the property. So the landlord, once he's aware of this, once he's got notice, he has to do it within a reasonable time, and failure to do so is a breach of contract on the landlord's part.
Now, Yasmin, had you known all of this? What difference would that have made to you?
Definitely. Obviously, I didn't know much. Well, I was going to say much at all, but I didn't know.
Because you were young as well, and like you said, that was taken advantage of.
I didn't know enough, and it was kind of, we were trusting the agency's word. Kind of, they were saying it's fine, everything will be okay, and I didn't realise that it's upsetting to realise that you have to basically record people, have to have everything in writing. Someone says something to you, you want that to be kind of true, but you realise that here in this kind of it's
just sad, because it's true, you can't you want to trust people, and especially if your landlord or the agency that you're with say to you, don't worry about it, you don't need, that bit doesn't matter in the contract. You should never accept that, should you, Dirghayu?
I think the key thing for tenants is to look after themselves and protect their position, and when you're sort of dealing with a private landlord, it's best to sort of keep an audit trail of all your communication. So whether it's reporting disrepair,
even if they're really nice to you,
even if they're very nice,
'cause you can't be. You have to.
It's probably best to work on the assumption that things can sort of go wrong. And if things go wrong, then your fallback is your tenancy agreement, the rights you have under the tenancy agreement, and the need to sort of prove your case through evidence. And the best way to prove your case is to sort of produce emails saying that where you've reported the broken down boiler, and then the landlord has to justify any sort of inaction in sort of responding to that complaint.
Right. Okay.
So think on the basis that if my landlord doesn't sort of respond in the right manner, then I've got to do what I need to do to enforce my rights, and that means I need evidence so I can persuade a third party, i.e. the court, that I did everything that I had to do and it was the landlord who wasn't living up to his part of the deal.
Definitely. We've got one more comment actually. This one's from Chelsea Williams, and she says, 8 months on, repairs to my house have yet to be done and more problems are emerging. The family are now squeezed into one bedroom because the other is too damp to use. My son can't settle into his room because the damp is so bad. He's developed asthma and is always ill with colds. The back garden is unusable because a block grate means it's permanently flooded with dirty water from the sink and washing machine. This is my home. This is my home and they're doing nothing about it. I need to move out of here. It's no place for a child to grow up. So again, you know, now where health problems are even developing.
Yes, I mean, that's an interesting case, and that's the kind of case we're getting a lot, where it's affecting not just the tenant, but also members of their family. Right. And it's obviously, it's one of those issues where it is actually quite difficult to prove the connection between dampness, mold, and asthma. But on an intuitive level, you can see the connection. So living in that environment is not sort of conducive to good health, and it requires action. Another sort of interesting thing about that kind of case is that Chelsea was talking about moving on to another place. She may be classed as homeless because if the conditions at the property are so bad that it's not reasonable for her to continue living there, and it wouldn't be reasonable if it's affecting her health or her children's health, then she would be deemed homeless, and the state would have a duty to give her rehousing.
Okay.
So we're assisting clients with getting rehousing as well, where the conditions are really dreadful.
Really bad. Okay. Well, I'm sure that the viewers have lots more questions, but unfortunately we've run out of time. But thank you so much, Yasmin, for sharing your story. And Dirghayu, thank you so much for your expert advice. It's been really, really helpful. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, guys, so do stay tuned, because after the break, I'll be joined by Coach Chris Browne, and we'll be delving more into how to deal with the stress of having this kind of situation going on in your life. So please don't go away.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Chrissy B Show, always aiming to show you the happier side of life. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter.
Hello and welcome back to today's show, where we've been speaking about dealing with nightmare landlords. So now I'm joined with Coach Chris Browne. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Chrissy.
How are you doing?
I'm very good, thanks. Very interesting topic today.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to be talking to people now about how to deal with the actual stress of things and how to try and keep stress out there. Although it is a very stressful situation, but there are ways to deal with it. Have you ever had to deal with this? Or
I've had to deal with it once in the past. I remember, and this was not even a single landlord, it was an association. So I've been on both sides, actually, to be honest. It's terrible.
Okay. All right. So let's help our viewers then. So the first thing is, I mean, we have spoken about a couple of these things, but we're going into a bit more detail now. The first one is to keep a diary. So obviously you need to keep account of like dates and times of everything, what happened at each stage.
Yes.
Because we do tend to forget. And when things don't add up anymore, it's like, oh, I'll forget that bit. But that could be very crucial to any debate that you have later on.
Yeah, you've got to have clarity when you're going to like fight for your side at the end of the day. So it's good to keep those points at the end of the day.
And sometimes these things can go on for years.
Oh, and you mentioned you don't actually hold on to that in your mind. By the time you've got to it, it's gone. You know, something funny I always do. Anytime I've got a complaint on the phone or so, I always go, hi, my name's Chris, and da-da-da, and then I go, and your name?
Yeah.
But I've written it down, and then I look at the time and the date, and I start from there. Yeah, it's important, very important.
Yeah, I do that. Definitely. The second one is to make sure that you always communicate. So communicate as much as possible, reply as soon as it's physically possible with a calm and friendly approach. So don't leave things to kind of go on for ages. If, for example, your landlord or the agency contacts you about everything, you make sure that you at least reply as soon as possible to get things resolved, so they don't turn around and say, well, you didn't get back to us, so you don't have that issue as well. That's important.
Yes, the way you communicate as well is very important in that, I must say. Which
is actually goes on to our next point.
Okay.
Even though you may feel like killing your landlord, strangling, hurting them, the agency, always be diplomatic. Never ever write any threatening emails, though you feel like doing that, because sometimes you get so angry and so frustrated with everything that's going on. But if you write an email or do something or send a text when you're feeling that way, or when it's really heightened, you will probably say something that you shouldn't, and that can then be used against you.
It's one of the key areas in communication when writing. You think about it, you write an email, that's there for years, that's done. A letter, it's there for years. The motion that you had at the time, that's not forever. So you might have changed by then, but they've got that against you. So you're probably digging a trap for yourself.
Yeah, and you can look really bad. So if it is taken to court, for example, later on, that stuff that's written there, that you wrote there, that could make the difference. You could be seen as a troublemaker. You could be seen as someone aggressive just because of a moment of anger that you wrote that email.
You could do, but I could see it two ways as well. If you are angry at the time, do write it out. That's not the letter that you sent to them. And please don't write on email with their address on top and press it by accident, Write it out and then after write the proper letter.
Okay. Now, obviously, number 4, we spoke about this earlier, do seek legal advice. And as Dirghayu was saying, there are agencies that can help with the legal costs for you as well. So it is an option. And actually, it was quite interesting what he said about, I can't remember who he said, that there's a legal obligation for them to find you another house.
Oh, yes.
If your house, you can't live in that. That's quite handy to know, isn't it? Yeah. So know your rights, because sometimes people move into places and they're so trusting, like we saw in that video. Oh, the landlord says, oh, everything's fine. You don't need to sign that. Don't worry about that bit in the contract. We're friends. I'm friendly. And that already should be a big alarm.
Yes.
For you. If they're already saying, oh, don't worry about that, it's because there's probably something dodgy going on. Because if it's a professional agency, professional landlord, they will do things by the book.
Do you know something? I've got someone who's going through that at the moment. And this person comes from abroad and they were fighting their case. They're the tenant. And this landlord did a lot of things that he shouldn't do, but phoned me out, told me about it. And I said, look, write a letter out, get some legal advice, do this, do that and the other.
Yeah.
When she did that, the landlord back and said, I'm going to get legal advice as well now. Whereas before it was taking advantage. So it's very important to know your rights at the end of the day.
Okay. Number 5 is to do everything that you can do. So make sure, for example, that if the landlord or the agency is saying to you, oh, well, you've got an obligation to do this, you've got an obligation to do that. If you're not doing those things and you're supposed to be doing them, obviously you're basically doing as bad as what the landlord is doing. So don't just because you're not doing your part, I'm not going to do anything either. Don't do that, because obviously that can also work against you. So anything that sort of falls into your court, make sure that you are doing things, make sure you're keeping the place tidy and all the other things that you're meant to do by law on the contract, make sure you're doing that so that you've got a leg to stand on, basically.
Yeah, very much so. And just like that lady who spoke earlier on in the clip, and she spoke about what you said, what about being from a landlord instead, their position? So it works two ways at the end of the day. We're not taking one side only. There is the other side as well. Tenants don't always treat places right as well.
Yeah,
so
true.
It works two ways.
I've had bad experiences with that.
Yeah.
Number 6, make sure you keep all the evidence. We did touch on this earlier, but I know it's very tedious. You don't have to print everything out, but at least have a folder in your emails where you keep everything there. Any correspondence, even if it seems something very small, when are you coming to fix the tap? At least you've got a record of when that was sent. So if it does escalate, you can say, well, actually, it was 2 years ago that I sent this email. So just keep everything, even if it's something very small, even if it's just yes or no or something, a reply, something small, keep it anyway. Just put it in the folder, and if you need to print it out later, at least you've got it there and you won't lose it.
Just totally agree with that one.
Don't trust anyone. Now, number 7, make sure you get support, because as we were talking earlier, Chris, it is a very, very stressful situation. A house, a home is meant to be a haven. You go home, you relax, and if you're dealing with all of these things, it's like you even feel heavy walking into your own house.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, at the end of the day, your home is your well-being mentally in everything you do. If your home's not right, even when you go to work or you're with friends, you're going to be stressed. You're going to be thinking about when you go home. So it has to be right. And, in saying that, you've got to make sure before you've even started, is this right? Is everything looking right for you? then you go ahead.
Yeah. So make sure you do get support. So that could be maybe talking to a friend about things.
Talking to a friend,
family members.
Yep, exactly.
Even a counsellor. If it gets that stressful for you and you really feel like you can't cope on your own, or it's just taken over your life, which it can do sometimes.
Yeah, very much so.
Make sure you get the help.
Oh.
And document that as well. If it's a counsellor, look, I've even had to go to a counsellor because I'm so stressed about this situation. This is ruining my life.
And it goes back to the same thing of knowing your rights as well.
Yeah.
Citizens Advice Bureau, different agencies as well, back to the same thing before, and being able to counsel with someone. Yeah.
Okay, the next point one, this is very important, I think. Do you fight or do you cut your losses?
Interesting. Fight or cut your losses. I would actually look at it this way. Why would I want to stay somewhere where I'm not really wanted and I'm not actually happy with it? Because you might fight all the way through, but then you're still living there. And let's face it, you're not going to be getting on with the landlord after. Landlord's not getting on with you and you're there. It's not going to set an amicable situation, is it? Yeah. So do you fight or do you cut your losses? You've got to look at the better good for it at the end of the day. Start looking for somewhere else. Yeah. Start looking for somewhere else while you're fighting at the end of the day.
And sometimes, I know sometimes, you want to sort of fight for things and you want to make sure you get everything that's owed to you. But even if it's you lose a deposit, for example, or something's owed to you, but if it's stressing you out trying to get that thing, if you're a person that really can't handle that kind of stress, isn't it better just to let it go and just say, you know what, it's just however much a deposit is nowadays. Is it worth these few £100s?
It's not worth it.
To carry on with this, or shall I just cut loose from this once and for all?
There's an area in negotiation. When you're doing negotiation, there's some things it's called positional, right? Where I've got a position here and this is it. And what happens, my ego and pride kicks in as well. Yeah. So even when I realise, well, hang on, this isn't good, I'm just going to stay here and go to the end. I've lost everything.
Being stubborn,
yeah, that's it. Positional bargaining. Forget it, Got to work two ways at the end of the day.
Sometimes your mental health, obviously, always actually your mental health is more important than getting, being right or getting somewhere, getting something that you wanted.
Very much so.
And the last one is to take care of you. So try not to let the stress of everything spill over into your personal life. And if you have now managed, even if you've got another place now and everything's okay, don't hold on to the things, the feelings, the bad feelings that you have against the landlord or anything, because it's like that situation for you hasn't ended. If you still get angry every time you think of what happened, and it's like you're still living the situation, isn't it? So let go of that. Don't let it spoil your future. You're free of it now. If you are, you're free already. You've moved on. You're in another house. Maybe you've even got your own place now that you've bought for yourself. But those bad feelings, those memories from the past are still get you angry. Don't let that happen to you. It's not worth it. Enjoy your house now, and don't let things from the past ruin what you have now.
And put it this way, to put it in one, the past is past. And that's that.
Yeah.
All you can do is the present and the future. So move on, move on.
Coach, thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure, Chrissy.
And for helping our viewers with stress.
Thank you.
All right, guys, so we have reached the end of today's program. But if you want more information about anything that you've seen today, you can visit the website chrissybshow.tv. And also, if you'd like to contact me, there is a form on the website for you to fill in to get in touch with me. So if you have ideas for a show, a topic that you'd like to see covered, or if you'd like my advice. And also, you can visit my personal website, which is mylifeafterdepression.com. You can also send a form from there. But I do hope the program today has helped you, and if you need more information, do get in touch. Bye-bye for now.